Okay, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. So this week we're going to depart a little bit from the generator related videos and take a look at this thing. This is a Bomag plate compactor or plate tamper or whatever you want to call it. My neighbor actually gave this to me. He dropped it off a couple weeks ago and said, hey, I got it at an auction, used it a couple times, and it's just been sitting around. Apparently it's got water in the fuel. But I've got a couple of construction type projects coming up. My wife wants me to build a patio next to the house, and I got a couple foundations I need to lay for air compressors and engines and things like that. So I was actually in the market for one of these things. So we're going to see if we can get this thing running and see exactly what it needs. So let's take a closer look at it. Okay, let's take a closer look at this thing. As I said, this is a Bomag BP 19/48, made in West Germany. So that's got to put this in the late 80s, early 90s era, I would think. The engine is a Hatz. I think it's, what is it, an E67 something? E67 3LHK. Okay. Yeah, it's a single-cylinder air-cooled diesel. It's a little thing, too. I mean, look at the size of my hand over this thing. Ooh, tiny. It's also a crank start, which is pretty neat. Got your crank there. I said it does turn over. But the story is, there's water in the fuel, and we don't want to do too much turning if there's water in the injection pump here. That's obviously going to have to come off and get taken apart. We'll take a look at that. We'll pull the little injector nozzle out too, up here, and the valve cover, make sure everything looks clean under there. I pulled the oil dipstick already, and oops, sorry about that. It's pretty stuck in there, but there is oil. Doesn't look like there's any water, but that oil is really black and thick. So obviously it'll get an oil change. I don't know what the actual vibrating mechanism looks like. I imagine it's probably just a cylinder or half a cylinder that runs across the front here. And I guess we'll see what the drive system is when we take that cover off. I imagine it has some kind of clutch on here. When you rev the engine up, it engages the drive. Probably a V-belt drive, but we'll find that out in a few minutes. But first order of business, I think, is going to be to drain this fuel tank. It's actually quite full. The fuel actually doesn't smell bad, but that doesn't mean that, you know, half of it's, only the top half is fuel and the bottom half is water. So let's start digging into it. I don't know, there didn't appear to be any water in that fuel when I drained the tank. Let's see if there's anything in the bottom. Oh, there's some stuff in there. See, the fuel outlet fitting is just a little bit above the bottom, so any water, I guess that's a safety feature, so not a safety feature, but a means to prevent water from going down into the pump. It would be nice if there was a drain valve at the bottom of the tank to drain that water out, but oh well. Yeah, there's some water in there. You see that? A little bit of water. Let's see what the air filter bowl looks like. That's one thing that rarely gets serviced. on these oil bath filters. Oh, it's dry. That's nice. Wow. It's bone dry. It looks like it's never had oil in it. Wow. Oh, and look how packed with dirt that is. Wow, look at that. Huh. Oh man, I wonder if this engine's toast. Wow. That's just completely packed with dirt. That's gonna have to get soaked. Wow. Well, we might as well keep going. I'm not willing to write the engine off just yet. Let's go ahead and pull the pump. We'll pull the injector line, and we'll pull the pump out, and then pull the nozzle. See, there's a little bit of gunk in the outlet fitting from that pump. That's actually a check valve in there, little check ball. So, all right. Alright, so the injector nozzle came out without too much of a fight. Here's a look at the seat there. This area here is not a pre-combustion chamber. That's actually a cooling air passage. So we're going to take this shroud off as well at some point and clean out under there. So I'm still a little bit bummed out about that air filter. Hopefully this thing's got some life left in it. So what's next? Oh yeah, let's pull this pump out. Okay, before we start tearing the pump and the injector nozzle apart, let's take a quick look in the pump, well, I guess the engine block here, where the pump mounts. So the pump plunger is driven off the camshaft, and let me pull the cam follower out here because I want to show you something. So that just comes right out. Camshaft down there. You can see where the cam is. Drives. There's a little bit of wear there, but let's walk over here. Now in the bottom of this little cup there's what you call a timing button. It can kind of be hard to get out sometime, but there it is right there. When you remove the cam follower or the pump, make sure you don't lose this. That sets the amount of travel in combination with those shims. That is how you adjust the fuel delivery and the timing. So these are specific to the application of the engine and the horsepower rating of the engine. So don't lose it, don't misplace it. Make sure it doesn't fall in the crankcase when you take the pump out. Alright, let's take a look at that pump itself now. Okay, let's start taking this fuel pump apart. Now I've peeled the two shims off that rest between the flange of the pump and the block. They had a little bit of silicone sealer on them, so we'll have to clean those up. You can see one's probably about 4/1000ths of an inch, the other one's probably 20/1000ths or so. So set those aside. I've already loosened these fittings on the top. We got the outlet fitting here. Has a little check ball in it. Take that out. There's a copper sealing washer. Little check ball, and the inlet fitting is just a hose barb essentially. No check valve in there. A little bit of dirt, a little bit of rust. Sealing washer for that one. Yeah, there's some water in there. Pull the delivery valve out. Now when you remove this, be careful you don't lose anything. Almost got away from me there. So In the delivery valve nut or holder, you got a spring at the top. There's a little seat of sorts with a couple little shims itself. Looks like there's 3 little shims there. So keep in mind the way that came out. And there's a copper sealing washer in there as well. Right there. Yep, little copper sealing washer. Don't lose that. Just gonna put this right back like that. Set it aside. Alright, so underneath that, there's the delivery valve itself and its seat. That valve's a little sticky. So there's the fuel delivery valve. There's a 45, or there's a tapered seat there. I don't know if it's a 45, who knows. And there's a little seat right there. Right? That sits beneath the hold down nut. And in the bottom there, you're looking at the pump barrel and the pump element itself, or the plunger. Now, these surfaces, we'll get a closer look at them. This face right here and this face here, it's extremely important that you don't scratch that or abrade it or anything like that, because that's a precision lapped seal. Same thing with the delivery valve seal right in this area here, in the top of the delivery valve seat. All have to remain scratch free. Like if there was rust pitting right here, it's trash. Just throw it away. But that looks good. No pitting. Looks like the water didn't have much time to do any damage. But the plunger is still stuck. That element right there is stuck in the barrel. We should be able to pull that right out, but we can't. So, and we cannot rotate the plunger either. This lever arm right here, this pin rides, well, in a fork, I'll show you later. And when you rotate this pin, it's supposed to rotate the element within the barrel, and that controls how much fuel you're delivering at any given stroke. So we've got to get that loosened up. I'm going to put a little bit of, what do I have here? First we're going to shoot a little bit of brake clean in there. See if there's any, diesel fuel will gum up and it'll hold that pretty fast there. I'm going to just work it a little bit. It's probably not going to do it. Now we're going to have to resort to some penetrating oil on that, and maybe a couple of gentle taps right on the top of the element. But first, let's let it soak for a few minutes. Well, I've had the pump element soaking for a few minutes in some penetrating oil, and I'm a little bit impatient to see what the condition of it is, so we're going to go ahead and try to tap it down and tap it on out of the barrel. So I've got a little brass punch here. I'm going to seat that brass, see that hole right in the center of the pump element? I'm going to seat the tip of this right in that hole in the center. If I can find it there. Right there. And just lightly tap on it. And it doesn't seem to want to move. She's still stuck pretty fast. It's moving a little bit, but it's taking a pretty solid hit. give it a few more minutes to soak. Alright, well, here's all the fuel system components disassembled. I was able to get the pump element out of the barrel. And to be honest, it looks pretty rough, but the critical areas, which is pretty much this whole area here, looks usable. Down at the bottom here we got some dirt, even some pitting there. I've never seen pitting on a pump plunger, but that might not be a problem. The barrel looks okay as well. There might be there's definitely some pitting there at the base, but I think this is worth cleaning and at least trying. We'll clean it, we'll assemble it, and see if we can get some fuel flow. The issue here is the injector nozzle. Now, this was very, very difficult to get apart. And in doing so, I believe I cracked part of this. I don't even know what you would call this exactly, but it is assembled like this, and then the sleeve threads over top. So this is the actual nozzle, the pintle type nozzle. That's rusted up. The pintle itself is completely frozen in there. I managed to break that off, which I'm not happy about that. I'm actually pretty frustrated at myself. I should have been more patient, but that's pretty well rusted up. And then here there's a spring in here, and then there's this cup point here that's completely stuck. So really this injector is pretty well shot, unfortunately. If I didn't crack that, I'd probably be trying to work on getting the pintle out and cleaning the rest of the thing up, but unfortunately I think that's really going to hold us up. So to keep this video going, I just happen to have this engine right here. This is the exact same model of what's on the compactor. So we're going to go ahead and steal the injector nozzle out of this engine, because I know this thing runs. It actually runs pretty well. So we're going to steal that injector nozzle, clean the pump up, and see if we can get that compactor running. Because I think a new injector is going to set me back about $100. I'm going to have to buy the whole injector assembly, really, just to get this one part. Which I don't feel too bad about buying the whole assembly, because the nozzle's probably shot. That's a critical part. If your nozzle's shot, the thing's never going to run well. And I'm sure the spring up inside this assembly is completely shot as well. So I don't feel bad about having to buy a new injector. But let's see if the engine runs. Okay, well, I've got all the components cleaned up as best as they need to be, and we're ready to start reassembling this pump. I want to speak real quick about the pump element, or the plunger, and the barrel. This is the main heart of the pump. This is what's doing the actual action of pumping fuel, building pressure, and overcoming the pintle, spring, and the injector, and allowing the injector to fire. So these parts, it's very important that these parts are in decent shape. These are not the best, but I think that they're sufficient for me to at least test run this engine. So now it's a bit difficult for me to explain how these work in conjunction with each other, but fuel delivery is accomplished by this action right here. The pump plunger has a stroke of about 3/16 of an inch, and depending upon where the plunger is rotated, has about 90 degrees of rotation from no fuel to full fuel. That determines how much fuel is delivered into the combustion chamber through the injector nozzle. Now, one thing to note is that injection begins at different times depending on the position of the element, but it always ends at the same time. you can see that there's a helix. Let me set this down, grab a little something to point with. There's a helix cut into this plunger. So you can understand that if, being the barrel is stationary, if the inlet port was the tip of this pick, and the plunger is always traveling up and down in the same way, or at the same amount, let me put it that way. The port, the pick, is only covered for a small time here and a larger time here, being the stroke is the same. When that port is covered by this surface right here, this little triangle here, the element is pumping. So when you're in a low fuel position, which would be here, the port is only covered a brief time, and injection begins later. Injection always ends at the same time because of this cut right here. Right? So when that plunger is up at the end of its travel, this port, or not the port, but this cut uncovers the port, and that ends injection. That relieves the pressure at the top of the plunger. It's a bit difficult for me to not understand, but for me to describe without drawing a nice big picture. But maybe we'll get to that in a later video. So let's go ahead and put this back together. So I'm gonna just use the element itself to drip a little bit of oil. This is a very light oil into the barrel of the plunger and apply it to the top here. So set that down. Slip the plunger in the body. It only goes in one way. There's a key down at the bottom there. Get that to seat. There it goes. So that's seated. Then we'll put the delivery valve body in. Put a little bit of oil on the valve itself. Need clean hands for this operation, by the way. So set that right there. And we'll go ahead and pop the spring in, the delivery valve holder, pop the copper washer in, put a little bit of oil on that O-ring. Roll that over there. No problem. And we've got to get the little tip of that delivery valve to seat on that spring. So sometimes it's actually easier if I do it the opposite way of what I just did. Let me pull that delivery valve body out. And we'll set that in the delivery valve holder like that. And I'm going to hold the barrel from the bottom and assemble it like this. I put a little bit of oil on them threads first. Okay. Okay. Just finger tight for right now, that's fine. So we can put the pump plunger in. We'll put a little bit of oil on that. Let it run down a little bit. Now there, it's important, this can only go in one way, and there's a little notch cut in. You probably can't see it, but there's always there's going to be a dot or a notch or something cut in. That needs to face the key that holds the barrel in. You can see where there's a hole drilled for the key. So go ahead and put that in. I don't know, there's probably a technical name for this component, but you call it the rack, or the rack pin. Sits in there like that, and there's a fork that the governor actually, this pin rides in, and that is what rotates the pump element. So pull this back a little ways. Actually, that can stay where it's at. Put this little cup in. Got a little spring retaining ring, snaps in there, hook it down in there, and just needs to rotate over here. There we go, it snaps in place. We'll pull the element back, and we've got to get this spring on here. And a little bit difficult component or part of this job is with the, got to keep the element up, compress the spring, which is easier said than done sometimes, and get the little keeper on. Oh boy, it's gonna fight me, isn't it? And on camera. Let's try it one more time, then I'm gonna do it off camera, if that doesn't work. There's probably a tool for this. Gotta be careful. I don't want that flying out and taking my eye out. There it goes. And there you go. Reassembled. Nice and smooth. And we'll just pop these back in. So let's see. This would be the outlet. Little check ball in it. I shouldn't call it the outlet. This is really the bleeder valve, which is always open in this case, and the inlet. Okay, let's get it back on the engine. Okay, so here's where we're at. I pulled the cooling shroud off just to clean around the fins. They weren't all that dirty. I thought they were going to be worse. And I also pulled the rocker arm cover off to take a peek in there. It looks awful clean. I'm pretty surprised, actually. Not a lot of sludge at all. Kind of this gray looking stuff. I'm not thrilled about that. Hopefully the bottom end's not full of that. But I think that's actually about it for this video. It's getting a little bit late. It's Sunday afternoon, and I got a couple house projects I got to get done before the weekend's out. So we're gonna follow up with this next week. So thanks for watching.